give a warm welcome to the hosts of The Bride of Alternate Ending.
Hello, ghouls and goblins, and welcome back to Bride of Alternate Ending. I am one of your hosts, Brennan Klein, and with me, as always, is your other one of your hosts, Tim Brayton. Hi, Tim.
Hi, I am indeed one of your hosts.
Yes.
So,
This month we are doing horror comedies as recommended by one of our patrons, whose name I should have pulled up before I started talking. More on that in a minute. But we are going to be talking about 1974's Young Frankenstein. And I know for horror movies, I'm usually like a star to a star and a half higher than you in my ratings. So you must have given Young Frankenstein like 1 star, right?
I mean, so here's the thing about Young Frankenstein. We're saying horror comedy, and I think there is a degree to which something can be a horror comedy, and that it is trying to be both horror and funny. Mm-hmm. And there are things that are comedies trafficking in the narrative stuff of horror. And this is clearly the second.
Oh, absolutely.
And so that is why I think it falls outside of the purview of the thing where you give horror movies a star to a star and a half more than I do.
No, absolutely. I was just trying to poke you with a stick at just right at the beginning, get this going.
I am going to remain calm and implacable because comedy is subjective.
It absolutely is.
And somehow you've still managed to be objectively wrong with your opinion on Young Frankenstein.
See, here's the thing. First of all, the patron who requested this is Jack. I got the name. Second of all...
Well, thank you, Jack.
Yes, thank you so much, Jack. Yes, comedy is entirely subjective. I think that my goal has always been to destabilize the canon, which was decided by straight white men, and I think that I am staying consistent with my mission.
I admire your commitment to tearing down beautiful things and replacing them with nothing good.
Okay. Let's get into it. Young Frankenstein, it's an earlier Mel Brooks work. This is,
I believe it is his fourth feature.
Yes, of not that many features, ultimately.
No, not especially.
Yeah, but this came out the same year as his other classic movie, Blazing Saddles, which I like less than Young Frankenstein, if that helps.
It doesn't, but thank you for confirming that everything about the next hour is going to make me sad.
Yes. Anyway, this is basically a project co-created with Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder, who is the co-writer and star. Am I correct? He co-wrote the script with Brooks?
He co-wrote the script. Yeah, they of course started working. Well, their first feature together was The Producers in 1968, which was Brooks's directorial debut. I don't know how far back past that point they'd begun working together, because Mel Brooks, of course, had a very well-established career prior to making movies. He'd been involved in TV. I think he was one of Sid Caesar's writers. He had done various comedy albums, comedy shorts. There's a really famous project he and Carl Reiner, Carl Reiner, collaborated on, the 2,000-Year-Old Man. So Mel Brooks has been like in the world of comedy for a good 20 years, I'd say, at the point that that Young Frankenstein shows up. So it's not like his career begins with movies. It's sort of, he's an established name. He like is a known quantity even before then. But yes, as you said, Gene Wilder co-wrote this film with Brooks. I don't know when the idea came up, if it came up on the set of Blazing Saddles, which they had worked on about a year prior to this, or if it was something they'd been nourishing for a bit, but it is clearly a melding of those two men's, I think, comic impulses.
Yes, and I think it's an interesting melding, because there's certainly less Mel Brooks present in this movie, or at least it is present in equal proportion to Wilder. Like, there are movies that are completely Mel Brooks in the sense of, like, I mean, maybe a Spaceballs or a Robin Hood Men in Tights, and that is a very different feel than what you're getting from Young Frankenstein.
Yeah. I also I think part of that is just with age, Brooks leaned into what worked or what audiences were paying him to do. Because I think if you look at the early stuff, producers, 12 Cheers, this, Blazing Saddles, and I would even probably add Silent Movie to that list. I think there's a little bit. The shtick is mellower, I think, than it becomes at the point of Spaceballs and Robin Hood, and God forbid we say the name Dracula Dead Mother.
Oh boy. But yeah, no, that is true. But I would argue. I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen Blazing Saddles, but I would say it's a much more gag-driven movie than Young Frankenstein is.
That's fair. Yes.
Young Frankenstein is a very holistic, just kind of piece. Like, it is very much making its own entry in the overall kind of universal Frankenstein mythos while applying this kind of lacquer of comedy over it. So it's definitely got a consistency of vision that I think his other films are more willing to break in pursuit of a joke.
I can see that, although I think Blazing Saddles is the outlier in that regard in terms of just like throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. Because I do think certainly the producers is closer to this.
That is true. I kind of keep not thinking about the producers when I'm thinking about Mel Brooks' kind of overall filmography.
Which is fascinating because I'm never not thinking of the producers, even when I'm not thinking of Mel Brooks.
No, that's fair. No, just in terms of like, because I'm thinking about like these specific kind of pastiche movies that he kind of fell into making, and the producers just doesn't fit in with that. So I forget.
And that's fair. And I would say of the big pastiches, which would be the two we've been talking about, Spaceballs and High Anxiety, his Hitchcock pastiche, Young Frankenstein is certainly the one that is the most interested in functioning. It's the one that's the closest to being a situation comedy, as opposed to just like a gag machine. So it definitely has the most plot. It has the most consistent characterizations. Mm-hmm. It has a sense in which characters drive the plot, and the humor, of course, comes out of who the characters are. So there is that going on about it.
Yeah, and I do think that that's interesting. But yeah, let's talk about the plot a tiny bit. It's still not quite fully relevant to this conversation. So Gene Wilder plays is it Henry or Henrik?
I believe it depends on who is calling him his name, but I think Henrik is the one that I think sort of takes over.
Oh wait, shoot, it's Frederick.
Frederick.
Yes, it's Dr. Frederick Frankenstein. I won't mispronounce it. Basically, he is the great grandson of the original Victor Frankenstein.
I know that is spelled out in dialogue, but I don't immediately remember if it's great or two greats. But yes, I think it's great.
Yes. Basically, I think the Victor Frankenstein is his great-grandfather, but his grandfather has died, and he has inherited Castle Frankenstein. And he goes over there and, wants to make a monster. He finds...
He gets into the family business.
Yeah, exactly. And he does, and that is the plot of the movie. Essentially, all of the Frankenstein things happen. There is his fiancée Elizabeth, played by Madeline Kahn, who is menaced by the monster, but not in the way you might expect. There is an Igor character, this time is pronounced Igor, played by Marty Feldman. There's also a sexy lady helper, Inga, played by Terry Garr, and also Frau Blucher, the kind of maid, basically, Mrs. Danvers kind of character, played by Cloris Leachman. Mm-hmm. And they all just kind of bounce off one another while he's trying to make this monster and then hide his creation from the world and then present his creation to the world when he thinks he is ready. And there's also a kind of detective sergeant character who's running around this town trying to stop him.
Exactly. So the sort of, to flesh that out a little bit, there is an implication that, the townsfolk know the Frankenstein name, do not feel like they're well rid of the family, are very annoyed that this American has come back, even despite his initial protestations that he's not there to make a monster, which of course changes later. So they don't trust him automatically, and the inspector is sort of on the hunt for reasons to mistrust him right from the beginning. And Frau Blucher actually ends up being sort of instrumental in nudging him in the direction of continuing his family work, because she, as it turns out, has a romantic entanglement with one of the former Frankensteins and believes in the mad science mission. So there is a plot here, and it's actually I think it's probably worth making note of. It's broadly a parody of the Universal Frankenstein movies, but to a certain extent it's really specifically a parody of the more disposable later Universal Frankensteins, like Ghost of Frankenstein, where we get like increasingly tenuous scions of the Frankenstein family coming back to a village that always initially is glad to be rid of the Frankensteins and are really pissed off that some new Frankenstein has showed up to, like, oh look, I found a monster in an ice floe or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, it's got the lavish son of Frankenstein interior design of the castle, which is by far the thing I enjoyed the most in the movie.
Oh yeah, uses for sure the props and some of the set pieces, I believe, from the Universal films. So it's literally has the lavish set design from Son of Frankenstein.
Yeah, no, so that is all good stuff. And obviously it's presented in black and white. It is very specifically harkening back to that, but you're right, it is like the wackier versions. It's not like the story of the original Frankenstein has taken place in the universe of this particular film.
Yes.
Although they do kind of also bring in elements of Bride of Frankenstein later on in their situation. So they're basically everything from 2 on they're kind of plucking from mainly.
Oh yeah.
Oh boy, the Bride of Frankenstein thing. We'll get there. Anyway, so this movie is funny, I hear.
This movie is, to my way of thinking, and it sounds like you both are free to and shall disagree with me. I would call this the funniest movie of the 1970s. Yes.
Of the 1970s. Okay.
Maybe I would put the 2 big Monty Python films above it.
Yeah. I don't think it would come as a shock to hear me say that I would definitely say Monty Python and the Holy Grail is funnier than Young Frankenstein in my estimation. But I don't think I could argue with this being in the top of the 70s comedy. That's not a genre that I'm going to double check what I've even seen of this. I mean, it's better than Grease. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not too mad about that, I guess. I thought you were going to say what?
Well, have you seen, now I'm going to have to go on a little, what 70s comedy have you seen? Have you seen any of the Bogdanovich directed comedies?
No, I have not. The 70s is actually probably my weakest era of film in the history of film, as far as what I have seen.
Okay. Weaker than the teens, eh?
Probably. I've taken some film history classes.
All
at least as far as things outside of horror.
Okay.
Like, drama, comedy, action, all that. The 70s is probably my weakest link. So I do apologize to the world. I'm constantly watching things. I'm trying to build my knowledge.
Okay, well, I'm glad you built your knowledge, at least by having exposed yourself to this film. But yeah, so I guess I will take the pro side.
Sure.
And we will then hash out. So yes, I do think this is a deeply, deeply funny movie. At least partially because I think of the exact things you find unlikable about it. I enjoy very much the way that it presents a very, like, serious looking horror melodrama about Frederick Frankenstein, or Frankenstein, returning to his ancestral homeland and finding much opposition there. And Gene Wilder is one of the great performers in the history of film comedy at reacting seriously to really ridiculous things. Like, that's one of his particular gifts, I would say. So he is, for most of the running time, playing this as though it were a real Frankenstein movie, and his character is sort of torn apart by like the tensions between he wants to be a great medical scientist versus his family reputation is of these ludicrous madmen, trying to sort of be a voice of reason and rationality in the face of all this weird Middle European superstition. So we have on the one side this very like straight-laced, this is a Frankenstein story. This is not subverting Frankenstein. This is not mocking Frankenstein. It is telling a story of Frankenstein, and we'll get back to that. But you then, within that, have all of these just super, super goofy jokes. Like, it is a silly... There's not... there's different forms of comedy, right? Like there's sort of witty banter and repartee, and you look at the same period that Mel Brooks is doing this. Another Sid Caesar veteran, Woody Allen, was making his films, which are all very literate and very cosmopolitan. This isn't that. This is like goofball shit. This is every time Frau Blucher's name is said, horses start whinnying in terror. Or this is, the inspector has a wooden arm that he like sticks darts in and pulls them out to like throw darts and such. This is a lot of visual gags. It's a lot of really broad, dopey comedy. And to me, that contrast to this sort of really, really earnest 30s, 40s style horror movie mixed with just like overly sugared up children running around the backyard whacking each other with sticks. That contrast really works for me. It creates a sort of, I don't even want to say tension, because tension's not what's necessarily going on, but it is the contrast, I think, between a story that is not being made fun of, but a sort of tone of, let's not take anything seriously whatsoever. Let's just do whatever nonsense bullshit like Mel Brooks or Gene Wilder or their cast thinks would be funny to do for now. And I like that about it.
Yeah, and I would not want to argue against that approach as being extremely valid. I think that the best kind of comedy comes from characters that aren't making jokes. Like it comes from the wellspring of character, and this more consistent sense of that they take their own lives seriously and they have their own set of stakes. I think that's something totally valid, and I think that the juxtaposition there is valid. I think maybe one stumbling block for me is that I semi-recently did see all the Universal Frankensteins, which I thought might help, but because of how, like, genuinely seriously they're taking the Frankenstein story, it does feel like, okay, I'm seeing all of these elements that I have just watched retooled, and it's not, the story just didn't, like at the level of story didn't particularly intrigue me because it was too pastiche. I don't know. That's a silly thing to say, but I think I'm trying to figure out where my block is with this movie. This is very much like me going to therapy, like our Tetsuo episode, where I was like,
Sure. What
is my problem here?
Well, I mean, you've made it clear you just don't like Brooks's thing.
Yeah, I don't. That is the thing. It is this very broad kind of Borscht Belt, like shticky style of comedy that I think can work, but I have less of a palate for. I definitely, especially with comedies or horror films from an era before my own, I try to be really open-minded and try to remember the different context and the different culture into which it was created and sent out. But this just, it for the most part doesn't do it for me. There are things that are really good, and I don't think any performer is not, delivering. But ultimately, I think fundamentally the jokes that the film most relies on just don't hit me. Like, the Frau Blucher thing that you already mentioned, like with the horses neighing, I think that's a totally fine recurring gag to put in. But this film has a tendency to hit the button on its jokes a little too hard. Like the Frau Blucher thing, the repeating horse neighing, like that's totally fine. But there's a part where they really call attention to it, where Igor just shouts the name at the horses and then they neigh. It just feels like the movie is explaining its own jokes to me a little bit too often, and I got a little tired of that.
Okay.
Because I think it would have. I mean, this movie's not interested in being not broad or subtle in any way, and it just feels like it's a little more designed for kids than I was expecting going in, and I think it would have definitely helped if I had seen it as a kid, because most people had that opportunity, and I think that definitely benefits loving this movie.
And I will also. So I think that's correct, and I certainly did. I think I first saw this movie when I was 10. I am sort of the exact opposite of you relative to comedy. I don't think there is a single comedy that I truly flat out love that was made both during my lifetime and in the United States. The one exception might be When Harry Met Sally. I can't think of anything else offhand. Everything else I love is not... I don't love it because it's funny. I very, very much... My taste in comedy runs towards the 1930s vaudeville-trained Marx Brothers style. So I think... I like that. I like that sort of we're putting on a show. Let's make the jokes really, really big. And let's make the jokes really, really, bowl you over obvious. So, I mean, I think there is just a taste thing going on. The moment where Igor yells Blucher at the horses, I do think is a flat note in the film. I will not disagree with that. But I do see what you're saying, that in general, it's very aware of what its jokes are and tries to oversell them. And I think that's just... that's the thing. You're either going... That's the Borscht Belt thing.
Yeah.
Right? You're either going to buy into it or you're not. I do.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. I by specifically referencing Borscht Belt, I am certainly not interested in dismissing the wider range of Jewish comedy as it stands, but definitely the things that Mel Brooks has taken from it and the way that it calcified into his particular approach to comedy, it's just not. It just doesn't live in my heart. But you're right. That's the thing that the movie is doing, and I have the right to not enjoy it, but I don't have the right to say that it's doing it wrong.
I guess, yeah, that's probably a good point to land at, because it is the thing it has decided is its goal. It is doing well, I would say.
Yes.
Very well, even.
Absolutely. With the occasional flat note like that moment we just mentioned with Igor, but I don't think there's anything other than that. I mean, there is a little button on the kind of the monster is choking him and he's playing charades to tell them to get a sedative. There's a button on that I think falls a little flat too. It goes one line too far. But other than that, I don't think there's actual holes I can poke in the construction of the comedy here.
I'm not sure which line you think it goes too far in that scene. I will say the bit... So the scene, that scene resolves and Frederick catches his breath and then screams at Igor, "Give him a sedative." And Gene Wilder's delivery of that line completely sells it for me, because it's Gene Wilder doing the thing he does where he just cranks his voice as high up into this really shrill, staticky whine as he can make it go. And I find that to be one of his other particular gifts as a comic actor.
Yeah, and he is a gifted comic actor. I mean, I love Gene Wilder in general. Obviously, he worked with Mel Brooks in a lot of ways, so I have avoided some movies that he has been in. But ultimately, the cast is really solid. I think Marty Feldman is delivering a really, really good broad performance as Igor. Madeline Kahn in her 2 scenes basically is really delivering.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Madeline Kahn, circa the first half of the 70s. So I guess I'm basically saying Madeline Kahn between Paper Moon and this. I'm trying to remember what else. Well, let's. I mean, Madeline Kahn at her peak, and this is definitely Madeline Kahn at her peak, is one of the great comic presences in post World War II American cinema, I would say.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And also I would say, okay, so the first two scenes where she's directly interacting with Gene Wilder's character, I think are terrific and pitch perfect and my favorite parts of the movie. She gets a lot of really shitty material when she starts fucking the monster that's just not really very funny, but she's delivering it really well still.
Right.
Especially the final time that we see her where she's in the bride wig and she makes the hiss. I'm just like, that doesn't work. On paper. It's not funny.
I mean, I like it, and maybe I like it because of Khan's performance. I don't know that I could defend that moment, but it works for me.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. I don't know, just like and there's a lot of there's lots of good stuff, like Cloris Leachman playing the violin as she accentuates the dramatic moments in their conversation. That's really great stuff. There is a tiny moment, or it's tiny in terms of screen time and the fact that it's not particularly called attention to. But the inspector with the wooden arm, it makes this huge kind of like zing noise every time it moves around. And he zips it up to put like a shushing finger to his lips as he tells everyone to be quiet while he's making the most noise possible, and I did enjoy that quite a bit.
Yeah. No, and that's I think it's worth pointing out that's Kenneth Mars, who is, I think, in general in the world has not gotten his due as an actor. I think he's always a really reliable figure. It's not his only Mel Brooks film. He's also weirdly, he's the voice of Ariel's father in The Little Mermaid.
Oh, King Triton.
Yeah. So I always find Kenneth Mars to be a satisfying presence. But I do think, given surely the dumbest ongoing joke of any character in the movie, which is the arm thing, he sells it. He just completely embraces that's what the character is going to be, and he goes to town with just this really good physical performance. And I also really like his just ludicrous quasi-German accent.
Oh, yeah. Look, I am not above like silly accent comedy.
And this film has some good silly accent comedy.
Yeah,
I would say.
If someone is speaking in a way that no human being on the earth has ever said words, that does get to me. So I did like that performance too. Like I said, I thought everyone did a good job. Just a lot of the things that they are asked to do, they're just not for me. Like I would say,
sure,
the line that I knew of Young Frankenstein before going in, like the line that I've always heard quoted from people, is him correcting people when they say his name, him saying Frankenstein. And for me, that line has never been funny even once. I think it is it just feels really thin to me. And it has never delivered. I've never been like, ha ha ha, you can pronounce words in different ways. It does eventually tie into his character because he is trying to kind of remove himself from his great-grandfather's legacy, so it comes around in a way that actually services the story.
And I have two responses. One is, what boring people quote Young Frankenstein to you, because that's certainly not one of the lines that I have ever felt compelled to quote from this motion picture.
Okay, good.
But I mean, I don't even necessarily, gags are made out of it. Like when Igor pronounces his name as Igor, and it's clearly like him being snotty about that, or when he asks if it's pronounced Froderick Frankenstein.
Yeah.
I don't know that I regard that itself as being a gag. Even it's a character beat, because it then pays off later. And I guess I can see where it's meant to be funny, but it's not something that has ever struck me as. Again, this is a movie where the jokes involve like anything Marty Feldman does, or as you say, Madeline Kahn dressing up as the Bride of Frankenstein. The jokes are big and they're telegraphed, and I feel like Frankenstein is not telegraphed that way, so I guess it never registered to me as that was like a gag.
Huh. Okay, well maybe my reaction to it then is the fact that whatever boring people have been in my life have really put it on a pedestal as a joke. And coming into the movie, like being aware of that, it just does not service that experience.
No. I mean, I'm trying to think of what would be the jokes that I quote, and I don't know that I do necessarily from this film as I do with other films, but it wouldn't be that one.
Yeah, I mean,
for sure.
I would say a lot of the best parts of this movie, it's not necessarily dialogue. It's in physical performance. It's in.
It is like I think probably my favorite single joke from this movie, and I'm sure that statement will come back to bite me on the ass, is when Leachman is being very menacing and mysterious as she's going to bed for the evening, and she keeps like asking, does Frederick need anything? And she ends with Ovaltine. Mm-hmm. And it's such a great, like, Leachman sells that word. The way she, like, frames the O with her mouth is so, again, it's as you said, people pronouncing words in ways that words don't get pronounced. And it's great because it's already sort of like we've had our rule of three, like she says warm milk before she says that, so that feels like the joke. And then it almost feels like Leachman has suddenly decided in the moment of the scene, oh wait, there's one more thing I can add, which of course I'm sure is not how it was written. But that to me is a phenomenal joke that is entirely performance-based. And not just physical performance, vocal performance as well, but like that becomes funny because of Leachman. And I mean... Mm-hmm. It's planned that way. Like it's meant to be funny because of the delivery. But
yeah, but it's not something you can really repeat in a casual conversation in that way.
Exactly.
And also, look, I am not wholly immune to this. This is an instinct that a lot of annoying movie people have, but the idea that someone mentions a movie and then you say a line from that movie has never really made sense to me, but people do it all the time.
This is truth.
You know, if you're talking about Dirty Harry and someone's like, "What we have is a failure to communicate," and I'm like, "Yep, that's a line from that movie. Congrats."
I mean, it's not. So if people are saying that it's the line from Dirty Harry, then you do indeed know some very strange people.
Okay, did I fuck up? Which one is that from?
That is from Cool Hand Luke.
Which one is... I just fucked up. 70s, again, 70s not my vibe.
And Cool Hand Luke is from the 60s, no less.
Yes, but Dirty Harry is from the 70s, right?
Dirty Harry is from the 70s. The big line from Dirty Harry is... Well, there's two. And it's tough for me because I sometimes get Dirty Harry confused with its sequels.
And Cool Hand Luke.
Go ahead. I have never gotten Dirty Harry confused with Cool Hand Luke, no. Go Ahead, Make My Day is from one of the Dirty Harrys. I think it's the first one. And Do You Feel Lucky, Punk, Well Do Ya is also from Dirty Harry.
Got it. Well, I have revealed the fact that I do not listen to people when they say these annoying things.
Clearly. Well, no, I'm not saying that people aren't telling you Dirty Harry has lines from Cool Hand Luke. I'm saying those people are suspicious and should not be trusted on any point.
Yes, but even movie fans who are consistently correct, like it's just a strange impulse to me. Anyway,
and I mean I'm not innocent of that impulse.
No, nor am I.
Certainly,
if I got a good one.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's calling back to earlier in the conversation. I'm certainly prone to doing that with Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Mm-hmm. But see, here's the thing. Like the bottom line of what I was saying with this kind of digression is that Young Frankenstein, it's difficult to do that with the line or the moments that are the best.
I would agree. Because I would say, more or less without exception, every moment is funnier because of the performances, even the ones that are like good in and of themselves.
Yes. Like one of my other favorite jokes, they're trying to... Basically, the scene where Gene Wilder discovers the hidden library of Victor Frankenstein by trying to find where this music is coming from. I think it's Igor. He touches the violin and says, "It's still warm."
It's still warm. That's also really good.
Yeah, that I really enjoyed.
And
yeah.
I also really like, and it gets more into the broad shticky joke thing, when they pick up the late Baron's book, it just has "How I Did It" by Baron Frankenstein on the cover. I find that funny.
I did not, but I respect you.
Thank you.
And I didn't find it unfunny. I was just like, okay.
I dig it.
And see, that's the thing, because it's really just a matter of taste. And look, I wouldn't say I haven't been... Well, we grew up on different comedy stylings. I don't know, did you as a kid, were you exposed to a lot of that Marx Brothers, Three Stooges kind of era, or did you come to that later?
I mean, I certainly had come to it by high school.
I think that counts.
Okay. Yeah, I would say I did not have the Marx Brothers would have come when I was like 12 or 13, not earlier than that.
Okay. Well, I think that's a very important movie watching age, more than 6 or 7, probably, at least as far as
Sure.
your eventual like solidification of taste.
Sure.
But to me, I don't know. I definitely have. I'm not saying that this is my preferred realm of comedy, but I did grow up in the internet era of just this kind of like nonstop whiz bang comedy. So I can swallow different things in terms of like the comedy of Everything Everywhere All at Once did not bother me one bit because it's very much in the milieu that I.
That's fair, and I found that film shatteringly anti-funny.
Yes. So
Like yeah,
it.
I won't go off on that. But
Yeah. No. We've talked about it, but yeah. It really is a matter of taste and what you're able to, like, what your system's able to digest, essentially.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that I need that pace, that rat-a-tat pace or whatever. And my sense of humor does run towards the absurd, and I think Young Frankenstein is delivering a certain amount of that. It's just this particular sensibility just
It's the wrong kind of absurdity.
yeah.
So I guess here would be a question, because to me one of the main absurd gags in this film, and really a sort of watershed moment even for absurd humor, I think, because I think that's Mel Brooks is doing absurd shit. Like in Blazing Saddles, there comes a point where the film accidentally leaves the studio where it's being shot, and we spend literally an entire act of the film wandering around Los Angeles in 1973. And in the case of Young Frankenstein, it's that the climax of this movie comes by having a nightclub act where the monster sings "Puttin' on the Ritz." And I'm curious, how did that scene land for you?
I think in terms of getting to the gag, it makes no sense.
Well, that hence absurd.
Yeah, that is why it's absurd. I think Frankenstein's monster, like, shrieking, putting on the Ritz, it's a solid physical and vocal performance. It's not one of the scenes that I hated, but it's one that I wouldn't have put in my like top 10 jokes of the movie.
Okay. We are just not in sync on this movie at all.
No, we're not. I mean, we knew we weren't. I don't know, because like I have no interest in saying that Young Frankenstein is bad or that people who like it are wrong, because obviously it's not and they're not. But the amount of people who piled on my negative review on Letterboxd does make me want to never consider this movie ever again.
I respect that.
Yeah, that just it's exhausting to have to cater to the tastes of other people. And my boyfriend, who is a very kind and gentle soul, loves Young Frankenstein and wants to watch it with me in a couple of years and kind of like guide me through it in his kind and gentle way and show me what he likes about it, and I'm gonna do that. And I might even enjoy it more when that happens. But I'm not going to dislike it because you and Brian or whoever piled in on me on Letterboxd. That is not the way to my heart. And no. I lifted the drawbridge to Young Frankenstein because I'm like, you know what? Fuck this.
I respect that, and I will say you are a more generous person than I am. I find we have already named a film that is currently in wide release that people think is hilarious. I find the people who like that movie to be actually wrong. So you are kinder than I am.
I mean, we knew this like from the beginning,
Yes.
just as we as humans.
Yes.
I try to consider other people's frames of mind sometimes, and I know that's
I
weird.
do not.
Yeah.
I do not. I since I am always right about everything, there's no real need for me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Is sort of where I'm at.
Of course. Anyway, how many times did you say you've seen Young Frankenstein in your life?
Oh, a couple dozen.
Okay, so this really is, it's in there for you.
Oh yeah, I didn't even rewatch it for this episode. I had no reason to.
Yeah, no, I totally see that. I was kind of keeping an eye out on your Letterboxd, and so that makes a lot of sense. I don't know. it's kind of a bummer that I didn't like it. Like, I'm not happy that I didn't like it because so many people like it.
It's always a bummer to not like movies that other people are really enjoying. That is the exact reason there is not a review of Everything Everywhere on our website, because it's not going to give me pleasure to talk about how I don't like it. And I think that's very true with comedies in particular, is like when other people find something funny, it's like, but I wanted something funny. Who doesn't like funny things? And then you watch the thing and it's like, but this wasn't funny. And that's a real sad feeling.
Yeah, because I want to love every movie that I pop in. It's not always it's not gonna happen. That's how that works. But I want to be entertained and somehow reborn. Dazzling images projected on a huge silver screen. You know.
I mean, whomst among us does not want that? I just want those shoes.
Oh my
really
god.
all I want.
You can have the shoes. I'll take the sparkly pinstripe jumpsuit.
When I saw Top Gun on IMAX, and Nicole Kidman's giant ass stiletto heel, like 10 stories high, just like stepped in. It's like, what kaiju Nicole Kidman stiletto heels in the rain bullshit is going on right now? This is. It's like I'm having a stroke.
I gotta see that. But no, it's a full diversion. Did you know Nicole Kidman is basically the auteur of that piece?
No, I have not dug into its existence. I find it too troubling of an object to want to know, but tell me.
Yeah, okay, so basically AMC approached Nicole Kidman. They're like, we want you to kind of be our brand sponsor for this. And she's like, okay, great. And she hired the crew, like the point people for this thing. I think it was the cinematographer from Being the Ricardos, who she was working on at the time. And she had a screenwriter friend. I think the guy who wrote Captain Phillips wrote it. So she like called in these people and put it all together. This is her baby.
Did she like direct it? Is that Nicole Kidman's directorial debut?
I think she got someone to direct too, but like she's the auteur hand behind every decision in that piece.
I love that.
And she made sure that everybody was following her vision, even if she wasn't directing it. So it's birthed completely from the twisted mind of Nicole Kidman.
That is incredible.
Yeah, so it's really special. I love it so much. I'm sure she didn't decide that she was watching Wonder Woman. You know, I'm sure that was beyond her scope. But everything she says is completely 100% endorsed by Nicole Kidman.
Okay.
And every time multiple times people have talked to her about that piece and about how it's become a meme, and she's like, well, people just love movies and they really get it and they're really resonating with it. And I'm like, yes, Nicole, that is what's happening.
It's so good. I have a friend who is like making a point of showing up at AMC screenings like 22 minutes late just because he can't cope with watching it anymore.
What? It's so profound. It is like saying mass at a Catholic ceremony. Like, it's very important to my movie-going experience.
I mean, at some point, and my guess would be that point is going to come around Thanksgiving, it is going to be retired and it's going to be replaced. And I just really hope they get Nicole Kidman giving some other bizarro world monologue about the magic of movies.
I think she would do it.
Maybe whilst dressed as Santa Claus.
Yeah, exactly. I think if they asked her and she had time, she would do it.
I feel like she might. Now that I know this, I feel like we could probably get years of this if we wanted.
Yeah, I just it brings a tear to my eye. I have memorized the monologue and I deliver it every time into my boyfriend's ear as we prepare to watch whatever fucking movie we're gonna watch.
I love that. I love that a lot.
Anyway, Young Frankenstein. I feel like I've said my piece. I don't want to like.
Well,
yeah. What?
Well, I was gonna say. I mean, we've talked about the comedy, which is in some ways a tough thing to talk about because again, comedy is subjective, and it really basically comes down to I like Borscht Belt humor and you don't. There's a movie around that comedy. Yes. And I at least admire very much the actual production of the film. Like it's from an era long past where comedies also had to be like well made. And
Don't you miss that?
I miss it so much. Like there's atmospheric lighting in this movie. There are scenes that have been constructed in this movie. So I'm curious, setting aside your feelings about it as a comedy, what is your response to it as a stylistic pastiche of the Frankenstein movies?
I think as a stylistic pastiche, it's doing very well. I think, if anything, it's in several ways more lush and sumptuous than a lot of the later era Frankenstein movies that they're mimicking. They've really created this world that feels like busy and lived in, that it feels like you could walk around in, and I think, if anything, as a pastiche, they minorly fail at evoking the extremely cheap "this forest is indoors" kind of feeling of some of the later those later movies, but I don't think that's a detriment. I think that the world that they inhabit is so cinematic that it is compelling to look at.
Yeah, and I will say, it's not, to me, the level that the pastiche works on, it doesn't look like a 1930s film. Like, it looks like a 1970s film that was shot in black and white, just in terms of shot scales they're using. Though there are exceptions, and the shot that always like stands out to me is like, this feels like it could have been pulled out of a Universal B movie from the 40s. Is there's a wide shot of Frankenstein and Igor on the parapet of the castle, playing the monster theme to try and bring the monster back to the castle. And that shot in particular does feel to me like it sort of got the look of 30s, 40s cinema. For the most part, I don't think that's something the film is even trying to do. Like, I think it's just trying to be like a good black and white movie with really cool, moody looking sets. And I think it does get there.
Yeah, if anything, I feel like it evokes a childhood memory of watching these movies more than the actual look of the movies themselves.
That seems fair. And that gets to a point that I sort of seeded a bit ago, but I want to just pull out, because I think this is, to me, one of the defining examples of something that I very firmly believe to be true. Parody has to come from a place of love. Like, I don't think there is not such a thing as a funny parody that comes out of superiority. And I think this is a film that very, very obviously loves Universal B movies.
Absolutely, and that's undeniable. Like, really, again, I mean, I don't want to keep beating this horse more than it has to be. Like, the reason I don't like this movie is purely to do with taste and not to do with anything. Basically, any craft that was put into it. I think that it is extremely successful at doing the exact thing that it is interested in doing.
Sure. I know, and I wasn't even saying that. I'm just saying in general, I think that this is a film that likes its subject, and I think that does sort of, you can feel that. Funny or not, even whether it's a quality of it or not, I think it's just like, it is the case. And then you look at, I think a lot of the films that have picked up the mantle of Brooks, and then initially there was like The Airplane and those movies, and then sort of in more recent years we've had things like Date Movie and Meet the Spartans.
We sure have.
And those come from that place of superiority, and I think that's a big part of the reason why they are just unwatchably not funny, is because they're not going like, tee-hee, that thing we like is silly. They're saying this thing is stupid and we're going to make fun of it.
Yeah, there is a sourness to that.
Here. Yeah. So I just wanted to sort of, I think that is a sort of long-standing theory of mine, but I've never had a chance to officially express it in the context of Young Frankenstein, so I wanted to do that.
Yeah, no,
I think this is doing it very well.
Yes, absolutely, and you don't pay that much attention to the construction of this movie if you don't like the old Frankenstein movies. They clearly,
exactly,
put the heart into it. God, I'm so sad you brought up Meet the Spartans. I saw that at a friend's birthday party in junior high, and it was a bad day.
I have honestly seen no more of Meet the Spartans than was in the trailer for Meet the Spartans.
It didn't hit number 1 in the box office?
I don't know if it did, and if it did, it might have been before I was doing that anyway. So
yeah, look, you're talking to someone who has seen vampires suck in the theaters.
oh, I saw vampires suck in the theaters.
Oh no. Okay.
Oh,
That
yes.
that is a film that comes from superiority over the subject matter, and that is a film
Yes.
that fails on basically every level.
It's impressive because it is so clearly made with withering contempt for the Twilight films, and is worse than every single one of the Twilight films by no small margin.
Yes. Well, and I think that ties into it's the reverse of the Young Frankenstein thing. I think that disdain for the material really flattens it, and you're not interested in plumbing what makes it tick and what are the things that make it what it is. Because especially in that movie, a lot of things that they're making fun of aren't accurate to what Twilight is doing or what it's about, and it's just such a failure.
Yep.
Anyway, and so Young Frankenstein does succeed on that level completely.
Yeah, and that wasn't me fishing for you to give the film a compliment. I mean, but I think it's certainly something that's there.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I wouldn't give a compliment just because you wanted me to, but I do think that this movie is. I will revisit this movie at some point. I will only listen to Ben's opinions about it as far as how to think or feel about it, but I am going to give it a revisit because it could have just been I was not in the mood that day. Because sometimes, especially when you're doing a podcast like this where you have to have something out at a certain time, you might not be in the right place to watch the movie that you're about to talk about, but you have to so you can talk about it.
And I think that's particularly damning for comedies. And there's also comedies that you're watching alone in your apartment are absolutely 100% of the time less funny than comedies, even if there's one other person in your apartment. Like comedies are not meant to be seen alone ever.
Absolutely. The experience of that shared experience is a really powerful kind of social bizarre thing that we're hardwired for.
Yeah.
Anyway, anything else about Young Frankenstein before we move away?
I don't think so. I mean, I've seen this movie a million times. I have solved it in my brain. It is a film left. There are no mysteries left. This is just a warm bowl of soup to me.
Yeah,
but it is soup that I enjoy.
Yeah, and that is so nice to have. For myself, if I want to go to a horny Frankenstein movie, I'll still go to Rocky Horror first before Young Frankenstein. But like I said, I will revisit at some point, just not anytime soon. I need to be in the right headspace. I need to give myself a lot of time and come back for it.
I do need to ask one question.
Yes.
Have you seen The Producers?
I don't think I've seen it all the way through, but I've seen many, many scenes from it.
Okay.
I
was just curious before we close the book on Mel Brooks, if you had seen, because that is actually my favorite Mel Brooks film.
That I would be willing to give a full sit down with, because because the stuff I've seen, like fucking Spaceballs, and it that is doing exactly the thing that era of Mel Brooks was doing, and I'm interested in the other thing he had to offer.
Sure.
Anyway, I will tell everybody what we're watching next, but first we got some things going on. We just restructured the Patreon tiers. I think there are a couple Oscar slots open if any potential patrons want to decide a topic for us to discuss on a month of Bride of Alternate Ending. Tim's also now doing TV reviews, like with the X-Files Season 1 that we were starting with.
Yep.
How many episodes is Season 1 of the X-Files?
24.
Okay, so you'll be doing this.
We are gonna get. I think it will be around Christmas time that I start looking for a different property to do, and I'll be returning to the X-Files. Like I at some point hope to do all of it, but not in one go.
Yeah, no, that would be.
Season.
You don't want to imprison yourself like that.
No.
Like right at the beginning of a new experiment like this.
Exactly.
But there are also tiers if you want me to watch a movie and review it in the Worth Mentioning segment of the podcast, or write a written review for the website. You can find those tiers on the Patreon as well. There'll be a link for that in the show notes. You can find more of Tim's reviews and mine at alternateending.com. And, okay, so for next time in Horror Comedy Month, we are going to be talking about, I think, a movie you have not seen, nor have I, right?
I have not seen this movie.
Okay, so this will be a first watch for both of us. We're going to be watching 1988's Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. I'm really excited. This will be my first proper Elvira thing I've ever actively interacted with.
Same, actually. Like, obviously, I know the iconography. Obviously, I've seen like bits and stills, but I've never actually done Elvira in the flesh.
Yeah, me neither. Because I mean, obviously, as a horror fan, I'm aware of all the like horror hosts, but I had I had no access to any of that at the age that I was getting into horror.
The only first-hand exposure I ever had to any of them was growing up in the Chicago media market, Svengoolie was a thing, and they were trying to do a like revival of Svengoolie when I was in junior high. And I never stopped and watched it, but occasionally when I was channel surfing, I'd be like, "Oh, this is that thing," and I would hang on it for like a minute or so. But I never quite knew what to do with it.
Yeah, no. So I'm very curious how this translates. Obviously, this is a movie starring Elvira, so it's going to be very interesting. I might do a little bit of research for context, but I'm very excited to talk about it.
Yeah, it'll be a weird experience. It'll be, again, something I don't know what to expect. Doesn't sound like you know quite what to expect either. So
No, not at all.
we shall
but,
see.
Yeah, we shall. So yeah, that'll be 2 weeks from now, and can't wait for it. And until then, great. Have a great time, everyone. Good.
Stay spooky, everybody.
Yeah, do that.
That's gonna be our new tagline. Stay
Hell
scary,
yeah.
spooky, freaky.
Stay scary,
whatever.
spooky, freaky. Bye.